Are we running from death or for death? Let's talk about that. This is Deaths Gambit Afterlife. I've taken a look into Deaths Gambit Afterlife. I'm going to refer to it as Afterlife from henceforth. And this is going to be a little bit of a preview versus a review. I've spent many hours into this game now, but it feels a little unfair to give it a finished score at this point. But I will tell you what I enjoy, what I maybe don't enjoy, and just give you an idea of this game if you're curious. Afterlife is known as a Metroid-Vania. If that's not familiar to you, it's a 2D scroller adventure game. And this one has a lot of RPG elements and a pretty interesting story twist. Your character has succumbed to death. Well, sort of. You're trapped in this limbo state, and death will keep resurrecting you as many times as it takes for you to complete his quest. You have to do death's bidding to break this kind of curse placed on you. You have to break it by fighting a lot of different enemies in this state of limbo, and especially these bosses that you come across. Some of them are quite difficult, and it really gives you a sense of reward when you do finally triumph. You have to go through a lot of these bosses, and you have the chance to level along the way. I'll touch on that shortly, but this is a 2D kind of platformer attacking kind of game, where you have a heavy attack, a light attack, some sort of ability that you can use, and you're traversing this world in more of an adventure kind of status, getting through these slight puzzles to put yourself into the next boss fight, triumph, and get to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Now, that sounds maybe pretty simple, but there's a lot of variety that I've seen so far, where there's certain puzzles where you have to defeat these enemies. It unlocks a larger door, you go through that, and fight the actual boss. And that can be quite intense. There's a lot of these enemies that really swing back in a heavy way, and depending on how you spec your character out, it could be quite a fight. At the very beginning of the game, you get to choose a class, and there, I believe, are 6 or 8 different classes you can choose from at the beginning, and you're picking something like a mage or a thief or a knight, what's known as a death knight. There's a lot of these different options. They determine what your main weapon is at the start of the game and what stats you have that are higher than other ones. So, for example, a knight may have higher vitality, that gives you a longer health bar. Whereas the mage, as I was playing, has a ranged attack, and that's pretty interesting, but you also scale off of your intelligence. So it gives you just kind of different ways to carve out a character, and a lot of customization along the way. It's not just the skills that you're leveling up, you do find equipment and different weapon variants along the way, so there's actually quite a lot of choice to what you're doing and how you choose to attack these different bosses.
I'm afraid so. What do I always tell you?
In terms of choice, there seems to be a lot of these kind of choices that are either offered to you or hinted upon, and you're kind of left to figure that out. For example, you can become mortal, seemingly breaking death's curse, but that comes with heavy penalties, and unless you're wearing the right equipment, have the right weapon and such, it's not going to be advantageous to do that. But again, this is more of an RPG, so it gives you a lot of choice, and you can kind of decide on what you want to do before you really get into the thick of it. The majority of your time is spent exploring, and that can be really satisfactory for somebody who enjoys Metroid, enjoys Castlevania. There's these wide open areas, there's these tight corridors, but you're able to kind of scroll through them at your own pace, and that's a lot of fun. Especially when you find different equipment along the way, you maybe take a detour that you wouldn't otherwise, and it gives you access to like a secret area. That can be really exciting. I think the graphics are totally satisfactory. They don't really push the hardware by any means, but they are definitely interesting and they do the job just fine. The audio for me is quite forgettable. I really don't recall if there was much of a soundtrack to it, but that was all secondary to the action for me. This is a 2D fighter, and I don't play a lot of those, but this was pretty easy to get into, but I can tell it's hard to master. There's a lot of the RPG elements underneath the combat, and that's what actually stands out to me the most. I like the idea of different equipment, speccing your character. As you level up, you can kind of splash into a different area. You can add a strength kind of build to your mage, and there's a lot of customization that way. This one really landed well with me. I'm absolutely going to recommend this to anybody of the Metroid-Vania fandom. If you are curious about this game at all, I would give it a look, and I definitely had a good time.